Good afternoon. My name is Al Beatty. I'm a senior project manager at CalSTART, and I'm presenting today Beyond the Curb NYC, a feasibility study for innovative delivery pilot projects. So to start with the introduction and just the scope of the study, what we were trying to achieve with this study is to develop a guiding document for companies seeking to pilot last mile delivery initiatives in New York City that align with supporting advancements in policy and technology. We assessed approaches to implementing innovative delivery solutions that optimize curb space, support use cases for right-sized delivery modes, lightweight and human-powered modes with smaller carbon footprints. We're seeking to relieve roadway congestion, improve air quality through innovative deliveries, and do all of that while also meeting the growing demand for deliveries in New York. And as part of this work, we also sought to identify challenges to launching pilots in New York City and recommend best practices to overcome them. As a bit of background, prior to this study, we completed a white paper called Going Beyond the Curb, Policies and Best Practices. These slides will be posted on our website, so anything that you see linked here will bring you to see that white paper. So this paper was also prepared by CalSTART for FedEx. It researched dynamic curb management policies and practices, identified new technologies and policies to unlock curb space, and provided recommendations for city agencies and industry to facilitate the adoption of these new technologies and strategies. The scope of that paper was national and international. And this study came out of that effort and builds on the effort by zooming in on New York City specifically, and also shifting audience a little bit to focus more on companies and industry stakeholders seeking to innovate in this space. So I'll talk a little bit about the key technologies and current delivery landscape, but this is going to be a little bit abbreviated and you'll find more detail in the full slide deck posted on our website. Just so we all know what we're talking about when talking about innovative deliveries, these are some of the technologies and strategies that are out there right now in this space: electric cargo bikes, e-pallets, which are secure containers with electric assist to reduce curb dwell time by just improving the efficiency of truck to door. Lockers and micro hubs, staging areas for transferring goods between modes, and then digital curb management, including app-based reservations and enforcement. I'll touch briefly on the current New York City delivery landscape, but again, there's more detail in our full slide deck posted on the website, as well as in the Delivering New York Smart Truck Management Plan, where a lot of this information came from. So I'd encourage you to check out both of those resources. But in general, transit ridership is down in the wake of the pandemic. Home package deliveries are at an all-time high, and all of this is exacerbating really trends that were already happening, but really creating a need and an opportunity for new solutions for deliveries that reduce vehicle traffic, reduce curb dwell time, and overall improve efficiency and reduce emissions. A lot of freight moves through New York City, 168 million freight tons per year. A vast majority of that spends at least part of its time on a truck, and that's only increasing with an expected 68% increase by 2045. These trucks are a significant contributor to greenhouse gases, with 11% of transportation-related greenhouse gases in the city coming from medium and heavy-duty vehicles. New York City DOT is already doing a lot to innovate in this space and exploring innovative strategies to manage the impacts. So some of their programs include the Neighborhood Loading Zone program, which designates curb space for deliveries and drop-offs in neighborhoods. The Commercial Cargo Bike Pilot Program, which had a really successful launch and is expanding. Off-hour deliveries program, which encourages companies to ship and receive their products outside of the peak in the evening hours. And also looking into off-street consolidation opportunities. And then the last one here is a pilot project currently going on in partnership with BrightDrop, piloting their EP1 pallet in the Diamond District. So spend a bit more time on the policy context, touching on what policies, programs, and regulations are top of mind in launching a pilot project in this space in New York. One of the big takeaways that we got from our research and talking to stakeholders was that developing new policies from the agency perspective that respond to this constantly evolving technology landscape is really difficult. And agencies can be reluctant to develop new policy without first having proof of concept to back it up. They look to pilots as opportunities to help develop that proof of concept and inform future policy. But they may be reluctant to provide guidelines to companies on what's going to be approved in advance, because this could be interpreted as formal policy by companies and by the public. This is kind of difficult. It creates a little bit of a chicken and egg situation, because many companies would prefer to have clear guidance going in order to develop their project. There's no real shortcut around this issue, except to say that the process of engaging with the regulatory agencies in the city is going to be iterative, and providers should engage agencies early and often to ensure that the pilots that they're developing will be permitted. There are a lot of different regulatory constraints, and this certainly is not an exhaustive list, but provides sort of a high level of examples of things that you may run into. For one, there are sidewalk restrictions. For example, propulsion devices are not currently allowed on sidewalks other than mobility assistance devices. So this created an obstacle for the launch of the EP1 e-pallet pilot, so that rule had to be temporarily suspended to enable that pilot. Vehicle restrictions, we often think of truck weight, width, height, weight restrictions, but it can apply to a lot of different types of vehicles. So even cargo bikes have a width restriction where the width has to be smaller than 36 inches, and that's smaller than a standard delivery pallet. So you lose a lot of flexibility and opportunity with this statewide legislation. There have been attempts to increase that allowable width, but to date they have not been successful. Of course, there are a lot of access, parking, and loading restrictions in the city. There's a truck route network designating where through trucks and local delivery trucks are allowed and prohibited. There also, of course, are big restrictions to loading and parking spaces, which are always in short supply. Often delivery truck drivers are ticketed for parking in a restricted area or exceeding time limits. So this really creates a big opportunity for innovative solutions that reduce the need for that curb dwell time that creates that extra expense. One of the maybe less obvious areas of constraint is zoning and land use. So some uses might not be allowed as of right in a given zone, depending on what you're doing. As one example, storefront last mile distribution centers, where a truck just makes one delivery to a storefront location, and maybe folks are coming on foot or transferring to lighter modes to finish that last mile. But those aren't actually allowed in the city outside of an industrial zone as of right now. So that's going to be a barrier to things like shared use locker facilities and dedicated last mile distribution hubs. Additionally, off-street parking rules also depend on zoning rules. And as an example, commercial vehicles can't park overnight in a residential garage. So if you were trying to, say, charge your fleet in a distributed way by leasing residential garage spots and charging overnight, that's not currently allowed under zoning. But all of these policies are constantly in flux. The Smart Truck Management Plan lays out some of the policy directions moving forward, and this includes expanding existing programs such as the off-hour deliveries program, cargo bike program, and neighborhood loading zones. Looking for new opportunities in off-street freight consolidation and shared use locker solutions. There is an RFEI currently out that is linked in this slide for those interested in that. And prioritizing goods movement along with transit and dense commercial corridors. So the busways and transit truck priorities that are located throughout the city, that's also expanding. Looking for ways to shift freight from trucks to maritime and rail solutions and develop the hubs that would allow those intermodal transfers. And then continuing to encourage the uptake of zero emission delivery vehicles. DOT is also exploring the potential for green loading zones where dedicated curb space is set aside just for zero emission deliveries. And a few more things. The city just started on a project with the Urban Freight Lab to develop market research to help them achieve their goal of reducing freight emissions 80% by 2050. The Open Streets program, which was popularized during the pandemic, was made permanent in May 2021, which could open the door for new and returning locations that could really be prime areas for right-sized vehicle deliveries. There could be potential future changes to the zoning code to get to allow more flexibility around those examples I mentioned, but this would be a long-term change because it would have to be part of a larger comprehensive zoning update. And then finally, of note, all things policy are in a bit of a moment of transition due to the recent mayoral election. So with the incoming administration, we'll of course see continued developments in this area. So I'll touch a little bit on stakeholder engagement, who should be involved in making decisions about these pilots and when. First and foremost, the regulating agencies. New York City Department of Transportation is the key regulator for pilot programs in the innovative delivery space. They regulate the roadway, curb, and sidewalk use and set policy for goods movement. The offices of freight mobility, transportation operations, and parking are going to be the key offices to engage there. New York City Department of City Planning also is relevant because they regulate the zoning and land use I mentioned. And then finally, the Department of Buildings enforces those DCP regulations through the permitting process. Beyond just agencies with jurisdiction over what you're trying to do, there are other key stakeholders that can be really beneficial to engage. So these include agencies that don't necessarily have direct jurisdiction over your project, but may have allied goals that you can help accomplish, such as the Economic Development Corporation and their transportation division in particular. In terms of engaging with communities, community boards should definitely be engaged early on in the project to understand needs and appetite for these solutions. Potential allies are business improvement districts and community development corporations. In the full slide deck that will be posted on our website, there's a profile specifically on downtown Brooklyn partnership as a case study. They've done some interesting work lately monitoring curb use and deliveries, as well as advocating for pedestrianization of the Fulton Mall area. They can certainly be compatible with last mile solutions. Advocacy groups that are active in environmental or mobility issues, and a few of the key ones are listed here. Elected officials, including city council, and also borough presidents. As one example, Antonio Reynoso, who was just elected Brooklyn borough president, has in the past been active on clean transportation and could be a good ally. And in thinking about how to engage these stakeholders, it's important just to think about how does your pilot, or how could your pilot respond to their priorities that have already been developed at the institution or at the grassroots level. So in terms of DOT priorities, some of the ones to consider are, can your solution improve working conditions for couriers and employees? Can it help reduce crashes, particularly in high priority Vision Zero locations? Can it help reduce emissions and improve air quality, mitigate congestion and quality of life issues? In terms of communities, you definitely want to look at whether your target community has developed their own plans or goals that your pilot can help achieve. And then also in terms of case building and working with stakeholders, is there evidence of success that you can bring to these conversations to help people understand what the potential positive impacts are for their community? And the last sort of project planning element I'll touch on is pilot location and how to decide where to launch. The next couple of slides are a bit abbreviated here, and more detail is included in our full slide deck posted on the website. But some of the high-level variables to include are land use context. Not every strategy or technology is going to be appropriate for every neighborhood type. What is the product you're trying to move, and where does it originate and end? What density of deliveries is necessary to support your business? Where are those Vision Zero priority areas that you can help achieve safety goals? Equity, particularly geographic equity, and maybe pursuing projects in outer neighborhoods that don't often benefit from these projects as much as the inner core. locations where there's restricted truck access and open streets locations, and then also considering infrastructure, what needs to be in the ground in order for your technology to operate. With cargo bikes as an example, you need bike lanes, so it's not going to be easy to launch in a place that doesn't have that infrastructure. Again, there's more information in our full slide deck on these, but these are just some of the sort of high-level location typologies we set up for different contexts in New York to consider strategies. And in terms of potential areas of opportunity, we see industrial business zones as a major area of opportunity for these techniques. A few of them are listed there, and there's a map linked. Pedestrianized spaces, for example, permanent open streets locations, or Fulton Street with the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership I mentioned earlier. Future multimodal freight hubs outlined in the Smart Truck Management Plan. In terms of NLZs, the city is currently conducting outreach, asking residents around the city where they would like to see more of these neighborhood loading zones. And so that provides really good information about where there's an appetite for solutions that mitigate some of these issues among residents. And then finally, the Urban Freight Lab study should provide some good market research identifying areas of opportunity when it comes out. So to wrap up here, how can you set up for success? This slide is sort of a summary of everything I've talked about, but in the format of a process. So beginning at the left, if you're starting with a technology or a strategy that you'd like to pilot, think about how it would enhance safety, sustainability, and efficiency in the city, and think about whether there might be potential barriers specific to that technology that you should consider early on. Think about where you'd like to deploy your strategy, and where can it help solve a location-specific problem or community-identified issue. Bring that information to the public. First, you're going to need to do some case making. So think about what issues you're helping to address and whether there's evidence or proof of concept that you can bring to the table. And then once you have that, then you can reach out to your stakeholders, identify any regulatory constraints you might not have been aware of by talking with those agencies, and engage communities and representatives to understand their support and needs. And then of course, you'll probably have to go to square one, and again, an iterative process. And finally, some things that we saw as next steps and considerations for delivery companies. Key solution types that may be of interest in the city include shared use lockers, hubs for off-street staging and consolidation, an expansion of the cargo bike presence, and technologies aiding existing programs such as off-hour deliveries. You definitely want to emphasize solutions that enhance geographic equity, support worker well-being, are compatible with pedestrian-friendly programs, mitigate safety and congestion issues, and advance emission reduction goals. And if you are doing all of those things, then you definitely want to bring those points to the table when talking with stakeholders. And finally, look out for new policy directions after the mayoral transition, the forthcoming Urban Freight Lab market research, evolving labor laws and curb regulations, and freight implications of the next comprehensive zoning update. I'll close with just a thank you to the folks at the different agencies that we spoke with in gathering research, the New York City Department of Transportation, Department of City Planning, Economic Development Corporation, the Mayor's Office of Sustainability, and NYCERDA. Thank you very much. This slide deck, the expanded form of this slide deck, will be posted on our website along with a recording of this presentation. So I hope that you will check it out and look at all of the hyperlinked resources. If you have any questions or would like to learn more about this effort, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is abeatty@calstart.org.